Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable high-performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hello there, welcome to today's episode. This is Shane Craddock here. I hope wherever you are in the world today, as you're listening to this, that you're able to give yourself the gift of coming into the moment and just listening to my rubbish for the next few minutes. Obviously, it's not rubbish. Well, we hope it's not. Today, we're going to talk about going stale, or more specifically, how to avoid going stale. And this particular episode was inspired. I did an online talk. I haven't done one for maybe 3 years. My first kind of New Year online talk, kind of a kickoff, called it Win in 2025. And I shared different things, poems, questions, insights, ideas. One of the questions that I shared, which seemed to strike a chord for quite a few people because I got some messages afterwards around this particular question, which is, where might you be going stale? And that's what I want to explore just a little bit today, just to give you some extra food for thought, because I think it actually is something that happens to everybody. It happens to the best of the best. It's very universal, but it's definitely worth asking yourself and exploring to see where might you have gone or are going stale. And I think, look, if you're a human being, which hopefully you are listening to this, at some point you felt like probably you're going through the motions. Maybe it's with your work, maybe in your key relationships, maybe even with your own goals, or even with the way you see life. Because that's happened to me anyway, and I know it's happened to a lot of my clients. And then sometimes it's like the spark is gone, and everything just doesn't feel as alive or fresh. It's just kind of a little stale. And I think what I want to say to you is that, look, going stale, there's nothing wrong with it. It isn't a failure. I think it's a natural sign that something needs to change. And in my experience, going stale happens somewhere at some time to everybody, the best of the best. The key thing is, I think, to be open to it, learn to recognize when it's happening, and then maybe start taking positive steps to refresh your perspective on it, which will then reignite your energy, your spark. Now, I think as humans, we know with food in particular that, look, food goes stale. Fresh food is always great. If it goes stale, we have this kind of inbuilt wisdom in our bodies that goes, oh, I'm not going to eat that. I mean, the most obvious one is bread. Again, we instinctively know, I don't like stale bread. When it comes to people, I think we can see it in others. We can see, oh, they're just not quite themselves. The spark is gone. Maybe that sense of sparkle in the eyes is gone. It's dampened down. We definitely see it in others more quickly than we see it in ourselves. But when, maybe even in this case, you hear somebody talk about it like me, maybe it resonates. I remember a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, a friend said to me, "You've lost your usual spark." And I remember the time my ego was kind of offended by it, thinking, hang on, how dare you? I'm the guy that does this, that, and the other. I haven't lost my spark. But on reflection, I realized, hang on, there's some truth in that now. And I suppose I just got out of the ego reaction and then to stop to look at, well, hang on. Is that true? It is true. Why is that? And actually what that led me to was a rethinking of some of my goals. And in particular then, a rethinking of the way I was looking at life, the way I was using my mind. And that was about 10 years ago. And I think from that point, I decided, okay, do you know what? I'm going to explore a different way, which is kind of what's led me to even what I'm sharing with you since I started this podcast 3 years ago, is what I believe is a different way, a better way, a new way. And it's kind of more an intuitive way that's more in tune with life, which brings with it a higher sense of aliveness, less staleness, more freshness. Now, you've often heard me speak, if you've listened to this podcast over time, about, a lot of my work over the years. I've worked with and can work with very accomplished people, very successful people. But in a funny way, success can often be their biggest barrier because maybe at a deeper level, they kind of think they know it all. And without realizing it consciously, they've gotten complacent. And there's kind of an inner staleness that's slowly working its way around their system inside. And then that brings with it, and they don't really see it until you challenge them and maybe point it out. They don't see that there's a lack of curiosity, there's a lack of real openness. Their inner voice is inside kind of saying, yeah, well, I know that, I've done this, I'm the successful person, I'm good enough. And so they lose what I suppose in martial arts you might call the beginner's mindset. And the best people that I've ever met, masters, all would actually have a version of that beginner's mindset. And that keeps the freshness. It's also brings humility. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, just a quick one. I've had a few messages from people on my mailing list and listen to the podcast just asking about they missed the online talk that I mentioned, Win in 2025. You can still watch the recording online. I'll leave the link in the show notes. It's a low fee. It's 27 euros. But look, I guarantee you, as one of my clients said, look, it was a masterclass in 60 minutes. That's his words, not mine. I'm not making that up. But it's well worth your time if you want to use it to refresh yourself for the year ahead and beyond. And I think it's something as well that you might refer to again and again, because there's plenty in it and it's probably not what you expect. Anyway, there was a client of mine, again, I suppose in recent years, where they came in to talk to me because they felt stuck, or you could say stale. And they were talking about, it's something to do with my mindset and everything else. But as we explored, my approach generally would be, I guess, a 360 approach, a kind of holistic approach. I ask questions about everything. I watch for everything. And it was very clear to me after a little bit of time that there was an issue with their core relationship, their marriage. And when we spoke about it, essentially, I'm putting my words on it now, for them, it felt stale. They were experiencing a lack of connection, a lack of meaningful communication. But at least we brought it into the light, and then they made a choice to improve it, which they did, and which made a massive difference to the relationship. It made a massive difference to my client. And then that freshness came back into them, which then came back into their business, which meant we could do other things. But the core issue really was that staleness, which was an inner emotional, mental thing, where, it's not nice to have your core relationship off. Sometimes people just accept it. But I think when you accept things like that, it does bring staleness into you. And any staleness is like inner rust. If you leave iron outside, it will rust. You have to kind of prevent that, clean it, tackle it, spray it with whatever, what's that substance? I can't remember what it is, but some sort of a rust prevention liquid. The same thing kind of applies to us inside, is that, it's inevitable that inner mold will grow, that inner rust will come. There's nothing bad about it. It doesn't mean anything about you. It just means it happens. And it's just worth looking around inside yourself to do with every aspect of your life, your health, your relationships, your attitude to work, your attitude to life, your attitude to your kids, or your attitude to yourself, your attitude to your parents, like your attitude to, if you're studying, your attitude to being in a meeting with people around you in your work. You can get stale in anything. And so it's again like that inner rust. We just need to be proactive, knowing that the rust will appear, the mold will appear, and our job is to catch it and challenge it. And the most important challenge is on the inside. If we really bring it down to a very practical, granular level, I think you can approach to the day, thoughts can get in like dirt on a window that can bring just a little bit of staleness to your day, which will affect your productivity, your communication, your ability to see opportunities, your ability to sell. Even the next hour after you listen to this podcast, I wonder, could you bring fresh eyes, more fresh eyes, fresher than they've been, to the next hour, and then keep it going? It's not always that easy, but it is very possible. Certainly, I see it in myself every now and again, where I might just get disengaged with a project or with tasks that maybe once excited me. It happened a lot when I was writing my book, The Inner CEO, where I'd hit a point where felt stale. And sometimes that means stepping away from it, going for a walk, going for a hike, taking exercise. Sometimes it means just reflecting on what I'm actually thinking. Like, how am I looking at this particular project in that case? And then by catching what you're looking through, I found that you could actually really get rid of the staleness and then bring more energy. And it's a great exercise. It's very, very important. I think if you want to throw a little metaphor into this, it's kind of, think about a stagnant pond. It's a bit like, water in a stagnant pond. It will go stagnant, but it needs fresh input. It needs flowing water. It needs fresh water to stay alive, to stay vibrant. And it's the same with us. So sometimes a change is good, change in your environment. I find if you deliberately, intentionally surround yourself with people who are into this kind of thing, it rubs off. It makes it easy. That's why some of the things I'm in different peer forums myself. I run different forums for CEOs and business owners. One of the main benefits of it really is not just listening to Shane go on with his stuff. It's really to do with being around people who are keen on staying fresh, on getting the best out of themselves. And when you're in that kind of company, all it takes is one person out of 10 to be in that kind of state or that kind of level for it to rub off on everybody else. It's an easier way to do it. So let's look at you. Like, where in your life right now, if you're being brave about it, where would you feel maybe the spark has dimmed? Like, what feels stale or uninspiring? What areas might benefit from a fresh perspective, fresh energy, new ideas? Or what in your gut, if you've been honest with yourself, have you been avoiding or putting off that might just bring a sense of renewal if you faced it, if you faced into the hard stuff? Something that can happen. We do it maybe once every 2 to 3 years. We've just done it at the moment. It's where I felt we kind of got stale a little bit on our focus on financials in our home in terms of like what's going where, what's the plan for the future. And we're kind of going through the pain bar at the moment on a very practical level, looking at everything: money in, money out, what's going to go where, what's important for the next 10 years. That's also bringing a sense of freshness. But I will say it's not without pain. It's not pleasant stuff, but I know it's hugely beneficial. But I can feel the freshness coming in just from getting in tune with reality. Maybe that's one of the key points is, very often we'll avoid reality. So to try out an extra question, like, what small changes could you make this week to breathe new life into just one area? Pick one area and just think about some small changes. And even if you just took 5 to 10 minutes to identify that area, look at the changes, look at the things you might do this week. I guarantee you might be surprised at what happens. I know you will be. And just to close out, just to remember, staleness is a feeling. I think it's universal. It's natural, again, just like Iron Mustang, but it isn't permanent. All it is really is a signal to you that maybe it's time to refresh and to realign. That's it for this week. Ciao for now.